Rhythm of War by Brandon. There is no "the" in the title. It's just Rhythm of War. I've already failed everyone, and I'm sorry. But Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, one of the most hyped books of the year. It is certainly the book I was the most excited about this year. As you may know, I am a rather large Stormlight fan. The question is, did it live up to the hype? I am going to say I'm not going to spoil anything in Rhythm of War. I'm not even going to have a... Actually, I lied. I am going to have a spoiler talk at the end, but it will come up on the screen somewhere around here, and there will be plenty of warning. But I'm not going to deliberately spoil things from previous books, but just by nature of talking about book 4 in a series like this, there kind of has to be spoilers for the first 3 books. So, if you have not read Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson, I would click away right now. Yeah, let's get into the video. Okay, so the first thing I am going to talk about for Rhythm of War is just a what you need to know, because so far this is the most Cosmere connected book we have gotten in so far, by I guess Secret History maybe, but that's a novella, of novels, this is the one with the most Cosmere connections so far. So, in my opinion, if you are going to read the Cosmere in general, like if you're planning to read the entire Cosmere, then before reading Rhythm of War, you should obviously read Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Oathbringer, Edgedancer, and Dawnshard. Dawnshard is actually one you could read either, but it's better to read before. Warbreaker has just gotten more important over the time. It's at its most important now. And I also now think I am going to start recommending people read both Mistborn Era 1, Era 2, and Secret History before Rhythm of War. That being said, if you have no interest in other Cosmere books and you're just here for Stormlight, I don't think you're going to not enjoy Stormlight because you haven't read the other Cosmere stuff. There will be some things that you don't know what's going on, but it's like, you won't get as much out of the epigraphs. But I still think you can read Stormlight by itself, but I think if you plan to read the entire Cosmere, this should pretty much be last. I guess technically there is actually an Elantris connection here, but I still just don't care that much about Elantris. But I guess technically this should probably be, of what is out right now, the last thing you read in the Cosmere. Even a connection to the world for Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell is mentioned, so really I'd recommend reading anything else. So that is something I would keep in mind. Next, let's talk about the structure of this book, because this is a lot more like Way of Kings than it is for Oathbringer. Oathbringer kind of had we followed every character for every part, same for Words of Radiance, and then they all kind of came together for a big ending. This was distinctly, there was an A plot that we had for all 5 parts, but then there was one plot line that was only part 2 and 4, and one that was only part 3 and 5. So that's just something you can expect to go in. That being said, I thought all the plot lines were brilliant, because, as you will soon learn, I absolutely loved the ever-loving creme out of this book. To me, it totally delivered on my expectations, and my expectations were extremely high. So, let's talk about what was good about the Rhythm of War. Just like my Way of Kings review, there will be very few cons here. The only thing that I would kind of say is a con, I'm just going to get it out of the way, is I think they were pretty clearly the most boring, the least interesting flashbacks that we've gotten so far. It was Venli and Eshene. They had some very good moments, but I think the last flashback was the best, but in general, I think especially the early flashbacks probably could have been tightened up a bit. There was a lot from like 8 or 9 years before Rhythm of War, and I think once you started getting into the events of Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, and happening things like in the flashbacks that we're seeing during other books, that's when the flashbacks started to get a lot more interesting, but the ones from like 9 years ago and 8 years ago were just clearly not as interesting in my opinion. The characters there was kind of an A plot for this book, and a few characters really stood out for that plot. So if you're fans of these characters, you will probably be happy. And the one who probably got more than what we would expect would be Navani. Got a lot of Navani. Got Navani point of views in every single part. I don't think the statistical analysis is available, so I don't know if she got the most point of view time, but I would guess she was pretty close to it if she didn't. I love the Navani stuff in this. I think the Navani stuff in this, it isn't going to have the same universal appeal as something like the Kaladin story in Words of Radiance, but as a big Cosmere fan, if you like kind of the science fiction aspect of Stormlight world building, you're going to ultra love this. And even if you don't, and you don't care at all about how Fabrials work, you can just skim over the Fabrial stuff and be like, okay, fine, science, and you can just appreciate the character Navani and the characters around her, because there was a new antagonist in this book, who is, in my opinion, one of Brandon's best antagonists to date. I'm not going to say who it is. You will find out. It's pretty obvious by reading it, and her plot connects a lot with Navani. The other person who had a very strong book, and I think this person is one of the reasons why a lot of people, probably myself included, find Oathbringer to be their least favorite of the three so far. Least favorite is only relative to the other books, but is that Oathbringer probably had the worst Kaladin stuff, but Kaladin is back in form for this book, and I thought his arc was, his chapters in general were every bit as good or better as his chapters in Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. Absolutely, I absolutely love this, and also in this book, the themes of like mental illness were explored even more than we've gotten in previous books, and it was just done brilliantly. The combination of at times being soul crushing and at times being incredibly just amazing and like fist pump worthy. So if that's an aspect that you like about Stormlight, it certainly is one I like about Stormlight, then I think this will once again be the book for you. And I'm also just going to give a shout out to my boy Relaine, because he's always been a character who is like, he's kind of a side character, back character, but he's one of those characters who it's like, I've always loved Relaine. I think he's great, and he's even better in this book. Also, there's one other Bridge 4 character who I'm not going to say, who, him being amazing just came totally out of left field. I never would have seen it coming. Hello, Vin. But yeah, so you can look forward to that. By the way, also, this is not going to be a concise video. You might have been able to tell for the Sword of Kaigan, whatever, review, that I was trying to keep the reviews more concise. I'm not even going to try and do that for Stormlight. It's not going to happen. I try and only talk for 10 minutes. I check it's like 20. So this is a 30-minute video. Whatever. It's a 1,200-page book. Then there was also a plot where the main characters we followed were Shallan and Adolin. And to me, for both of their characters, this was the best book by far. This is my favorite Shallan and Adolin plot so far in Stormlight. Second is probably Words of Radiance for both, but it isn't even close. This is my just incredibly amazing. There is more Shadesmar stuff. I know some people don't like Shadesmar. I don't know. Shadesmar is cool. Like, I love Shadesmar. Shadesmar is awesome. I think for the entire Shadesmar part, Brandon does a fantastic job of having scenes accomplish multiple things. Like, there isn't one scene for world building, and then one scene for character development, and then one scene for the plot. The vast majority of the scenes do a really good job of advancing plot, character, and world building all at the same time. So I actually think, despite this being a 1,250 page book, of which my physical copy hasn't arrived yet, curses, so I can't hit it during the video, so maybe it's a blessing in disguise, but I actually think it was a pretty tight book. I think maybe the flashbacks could have been a bit shorter, but there already weren't that many flashbacks. There are no flashbacks for part 1 or part 2. And of the stuff happening currently, I think anything that you cut would hurt the story in at least 2 aspects. In at least world building, character, or plot. which is a little bit surprising. Like, a lot happens in this book. This isn't like a 1,200-page book and you get it and it was like, was that really is that really a deserving of a book this big? Like, this straight up could be 2 books. Like, you could actually have 2 medium-sized books, and this is a very eventful book. There are some slower, more character-driven things that I love because I love the characters, but that's where he needs to take time for that. Like, sometimes, with the story this big, you can't go rapid-fire pacing. And so there's times when, for a plot to work, you need to be a bit slower and more character-driven. I love the slower and more character-driven stuff because I think it's not an example of... It still feels like progress is being made. Sometimes when you have a slow book, it just feels like people are spinning their wheels. For me, it didn't feel like that at all. So I thought, in that aspect, that was very good. Anyways, apparently I was talking about Shallan and Adolin, but that's really all I can say. We also get to look more at Spren culture and some honor Spren stuff, and I loved all of that. Basically, Shallan and Adolin... my favorite plot line and character work for both of those characters by a large margin. They've both... Shallan, I think, has now moved up to being one of my top 10 favorite characters ever. I love the Shallan stuff. Adolin is really surprisingly fantastic, considering he's not even one of the main characters. I know some people aren't liking as much, but to me it was just brilliant. And the other B plot, that is only 2 of the parts, is following Dalinar and Yasna and Targaryen and Renarin. And you can probably predict what I'm going to say. I thought this was pretty brilliant as well. I think the only thing I could see some people not loving about this book is it's not a very Dalinar-heavy book. But we just got Oathbringer, and I imagine Book 5 is also going to be very Dalinar-heavy. But this one is it still has some Dalinar, and of course the stuff he gets is great. But he definitely gets a lot less time than some of the other characters. One of the reasons he gets less time, though, is because a lot of the characters around Dalinar get to shine. For my money, this has been the best Yasna book by a lot. The best book for Renarin character developments. Before, I was obviously still excited for the future book that has Renarin flashbacks, but I was kind of like, meh, whatever. Now I'm like, give me the Renarin flashbacks. It's one, I'm not still the most hyped for Szeth, but I'm now, my excitement level increase for Renarin flashbacks has gone up by a lot. Also, like the previous Stormlight books, there's interludes and people have one, and then there's also one person gets interludes for all of them, and for this it was Targaryen, who's my favorite interlude character and is just continually one of my favorite characters in the series and one of my favorite antagonists. And I actually think this book had consistently the best interludes of all the Stormlight books by far. I don't even think it's close. I even like the Lift interlude. And even though I was okay with Edge Dancer, the Lift interlude would have been my least favorite interlude probably for the first 3 books. But this interlude, we got more of a focus on her actual character development and less of a focus on her voice. So, interludes-wise, they're some of my favorite interludes in the series. I think if you're someone who hasn't liked interludes because they don't feel plot relevant, these definitely do. I am wondering, normally for me, interludes first time through on a Stormlight book, I'm kind of meh on, and then when I reread them, I'm just like... I'm wondering if I'll like them even more on reread. But for me, interludes were just the best so far in the series by far. I think it did the best for the world building. That being said, I think pacing-wise, it's better than Oathbringer. I don't think pacing-wise it's quite as perfect as Words of Radiance. And so for my for my rating of the book, this did not quite top Words of Radiance for me. And basically the reason behind that is Part 3. I love Part 3 of Rhythm of War, but Part 3 and 4 really for Words of Radiance are, in my opinion, clearly better. Part 4 for Rhythm of War is really damn good. Part 3, at least, for Words of Radiance is what really makes it stand ahead. For me, Part 2 of Rhythm of War was my favorite Part 2, and Part 5 might be my favorite Part 5, but if I'm being honest, all the Part 5s are so amazing that it seems like I just like whichever one I read last the most. But, this Part 5, which I'm including the Wit epilogue, best Wit epilogue by far, might even be my favorite Part 5, which is a pretty high bar, because Stormlight Part 5's, like, endings are always something else. But my overall thoughts on this, I think, character-wise, it might be his strongest book yet. Pacing-wise, it's not quite as perfect as Words of Radiance. Overall, I have pretty much nothing negative to say about it other than that the flashbacks were meh, but the flashbacks don't take up that much of the book. So, as of today, I will say I'm biased in two directions. This book has slight recency bias over Words of Radiance, but Stormlight books are also better on rereads. So, Words of Radiance has the fact that I've read it 7 times. That being said, I think I've settled on a rating of 9.8 out of 10. As of now, this is my 3rd favorite book of all time. I also think for the people like me who this is kind of... Oathbringer was a slight dip. Oathbringer was still amazing. It's one of my favorite books ever. But I thought Oathbringer is clearly my least favorite of the 4, despite being one of my favorite books ever. But I think this is really just brilliant and totally did meet my expectations as the most hyped book of the year. And actually still might not be my favorite book of the year because I read The Gathering Storm. I keep forgetting about that because I read it on like January 5th. But totally lived up to the hype. Everyone should go read it. I am now going to put up a just humongous spoiler warning. I'm going to give people like a long time here to click away. So if you're listening to this while doing chores for some reason, or you're just not close, I'm giving you time. If you have not read Rhythm of War, go away now, because I am going to do the spoiler part, which I will try not to go on for 20 minutes. I probably could, for Rhythm of War. I'll probably just talk about a couple things. So yeah, just go away now if you've not read the Rhythm of War. Spoiler talk starts now. So, spoiler. I mainly want to talk about 2 things for spoilers, because even though they hadn't come up yet, I had 2 long-running concerns for the last book of the Stormlight Archive. Brandon, the madman, has solved both of them. The first concern is that I wouldn't feel fear for Radiants in combat, because they're very, very hard to kill. Which this book definitely avoided because of the Eurythu shutting down powers thing, but I had concerns for that. But we now have Radiant killing weapons, because Navani basically invented the equivalent of anti-investure, which the Cosmere implications of are pretty massive, but now I'm terrified for all of the Radiants, because Kaladin can... Syl can die... Oh, it's really... Brandon, if you kill Syl, I won't be happy. You better not do it in book 5, man. I'm scared now. But yeah, so now I'm once again terrified for the characters, even the Radiants and the Spren. So he's successfully built the stakes up to... I think book 5 will be the highest stakes book, because book 1, it's like the characters were the most vulnerable, but also it's book 1, so obviously they're not going to kill Kaladin in book 1. He's arguably, or Dalinar, or Shallan, they're the 3 main characters of the story. But now, it's the end of the arc, and they can be one-hit. So I'm terrified, which is good, because tension. But, so yeah, I think that was really genius of him to do, so that totally gets rid of that worry. And the second worry I had is that Race was the villain, and he wasn't really a character. And I've seen people be like, I'm not that invested in Race as a villain. So what does Brandon do? He takes my favorite antagonist he's ever written, and one of my favorite antagonists in all of fantasy, and he has the guy kill Race with Nightblood. Bruh! And he's Odium now. Dude, what? No. Oh, so now I have Terragavian as the main antagonist instead of Race, which is both more terrifying and more interesting. Also, obviously, he takes up odium. We already know he had at the beginning this day of pure genius. Obviously, he has to have this day of pure passion, and that's the day he's going to take up odium. On another note, holy crap, Nightblood OP, please nerf. It dented an honor blade. What? Also, the long term, I'm fully convinced that the second arc of Stormlight will be dealing with the way Surge Binders are a weapon of mass destruction. Especially like with how much they explored the Spren and the fact that it's like, you know, yeah, we chose, which was awesome, by the way, but the fact that they chose that fate shows how dangerous that was. I said I was going to talk about two things. So, I'm also, the other one, fourth ideal shard plate. Don't let me know in the comments because this is a spoiler, but if you're in one of the same Discords as me, which most people who watch these videos are, or if you know me in real life, whatever, in any way you can, let me know if you think that the shard plate, all radiant shard plate can go to other people, or if it's a Windrunner resonance. Because I suspect it's a Windrunner resonance. It's like protecting other people. It seems to fit them really well. I really hope it's a Windrunner resonance because that makes it quite a bit more unique. Also seems to want to be one of the harder ones to get to fourth ideal. So I'm glad that it gets that. And it just kind of would make it a little bit OP for if all the shard plates could do that. Anyway, that was my thoughts of Rhythm of War. It was amazing. Everyone, most of you, if you finished it already, let me know what you thought of it down below. I'm now going to check how long this video is. Probably very long. Have a nice day, everyone.